Welcome to the More in Common podcast. We all know how hard it can be to handle conflict and disagreements, especially when it comes to politics. These moments can strain even our closest relationships, and that's why we're here. I'm Keith Richardson, and for over 5 years, we at More in Common have worked with professionals from all walks of life, NFL teams, tech companies, and community leaders, ultimately to improve how people connect and communicate. And with my background in psychology, I've spent 20 years refining strategies that focus on compassion and understanding. And I'm joined by my co-host, Gerren Kelsaw, who joined the team 2 years ago. Gerren is a producer, an entrepreneur, and a creative, and he lives the principles we talk about, bringing real-world experience to every episode. Together, we're here to help you discover how we all have more in common than we might think. Enjoy the show.
Woo! Welcome back, everybody. We got Dadrian again with us. In case you didn't catch it last week, Dadrian is the co-founder and executive director of an organization called the Diversity of Thought Project, where they build partnerships with a very diverse selection of companies, community leaders, and advocacy groups throughout society. And they're currently launching a program across Southern California called Pathways to Equity. Dadrian, welcome back.
Great to be back with you guys again. Thank you for having me. Really quickly, for anyone that hadn't catched it, the last time I was here, the Diversity of Thought Project, my organization, in conjunction with PlayFect, really launching an initiative this year aimed at really transforming the overall well-being of juvenile detainees in Southern California. We're working collaboratively with local organizations and really focus on implementing inclusive social strategies for these kids, tracking their developmental metrics, and really trying to measure the impact of financial investments over time. So yeah, you can learn more about this project of ours online at Meta, Facebook, LinkedIn, at the Diversity of Thought Project.
Well, we'll say it again. We said it last week. Super inspired by all the work that you do, putting yourself out there to make people's lives better. For those who didn't listen last week, we talked about engaging online and how you have come to do it well, and really just how you think about it. And you really challenged my perspective on how to think about it, and I need to sit with that. That being said, Gerren started to lead us in a direction last week as we were running out of time regarding the nature of those who aren't engaging with you and with a sincere attempt at understanding where you're coming from. We like to call them trolls. And one of the things this comes up a lot, and I'm sure you've experienced this relative to other people. I just had a friend of mine who is in the conversation space as well. She and I grab lunch once a month, and she was telling me about her cousins over at Christmas. No, she's Jewish, but her husband's Christian, so they celebrate Christmas as well. And her cousin said to her, "So you just want me to talk to Nazis?" And she's like, "No, that's not what this is about." And that, to me, very much exemplifies the nature of the impact of trolls, the potential negative space that could be entered into in a real-life conversation if you're engaged with somebody super ideological that has hate in their heart. And being able to continue on this work and do this work what you think is best and protect that peace that you feel, even when it's not coming back at you, and can be disheartening, it can be frustrating, it can be hard. So how do you take that space of online negative activity, as Gerren used his example of being called the N-word in Spanish because, He does his online work there in Tijuana. How do you protect that? How do you keep that going?
I like this question. I like this space. One thing that we need to practice, and I give advice that I'm working on. I'm in no way an expert at these things. I struggle still, um, but I have a goal that I'm working toward. And it seems to be something that people latch on to and kind of want to learn from. One thing is, and if you see memes enough, you probably read this before, you have to become comfortable. At least you have to become okay with being misunderstood. Like you'll drive yourself crazy if you're always trying to get people to see your vantage point, see where you're coming from, and understand and like you. It's an impossible goal. It's not going to happen. Um, so one way that I protect my peace is staying focused on the mission. You have to have a very clearly defined, what am I trying to accomplish today? What am I trying to accomplish in this space? What am I set out to do? And that very rarely, in the professional space or in the community, has to do with me personally. So if I'm ever bothered, if I'm ever feeling discomfort, anger, if I'm ever speaking to a lot of people, whether it's, public speaking or whether it's online speaking on a platform to a lot of people, and I'm really focused or thrown on what people are thinking about me, how people are going to take it, then that lets me know that I'm off, that I'm not focused on the mission. I'm focused on myself, how I'm coming off, how I feel, and how people are making me feel. And I just use that as a barometer to let me know that I need to refocus, um, because in order to protect my own peace, I need to be thinking about something else. Um, and if I refocus on how do I best serve this community, how do I best serve this space, and not how do I protect my own brand or my own reputation, um, it recenters me, and I'm able to speak in a way, um, that maybe I wouldn't be able to do if I was more apprehensive or held back from trying to, like I said, come across as best as I could personally in the space. And sometimes people throw challenges or they throw insults or names at you. You're like, wait a minute. Like, a lot of people are going to read this. I need to fire back. I need to stand up for myself. And again, like, that's not, if that's too far away from the overall mission, the overall goal, and you can apply this, in a lot of different spaces. Is it really worth your time, your energy, and your peace to even be addressing it? And more times than not, the answer is no.
So, real quick before you ask your question, G, I want to ask the same question to you because you led us out of the last episode with the example of being called the N-word in Spanish. How do you protect your peace and allow for that? Not allow for the comments, but like,
Right.
you
Well,
know,
I mean, you can't
allow
stop
for,
the
yeah,
comments.
yeah,
And that's
yeah.
not the only negative one. That was just one. I mean, by and large, people are chill.
It's a salacious enough comment that we can anchor on and use,
Yeah.
right? Like, what?
I think by and large, people are, listen, I consider trolls as people who weren't hugged enough, right? Like, the only reason why you would get on the internet to bother somebody that you don't know to try to get an angry rise out of them is because that's your misappropriation of attention, right? Like, you want the attention, be it negative or positive, but it's not necessarily the most positive way to get attention, so to speak. But I also try to take myself out of it. Look, I could have blocked that person. I could have responded angrily, and I said, "Who hurt you? Who hurt you that you decided that you should attack me?" Right? Like, I have nothing to do with what your problem. And that person didn't respond, right? Because they were probably expecting some more vitriol, some more back and forth so that they could get into a fight about stuff. But like, you know, you can disarm that kind of thing. And I think that's, for me, well, I want to go big picture on this, right? Like, the phrase protecting your peace is very common now, very widely used in social media and self-help. But for African American communities, it's something that's been around for a long time. Like, the concept of protecting your peace is something that is a very 20th century African American societal concept that we would use with amongst ourselves to talk about confronting some of the societal stressors that would commonly occur, right? Like, if you're a grown man in the South in the 20s and somebody calls you boy and you don't, you know, want to take that, well, you got to protect your peace, right? Like, you can't let that anger eat you up and prevent you from doing what you know you need to do that day. And you also can't necessarily, strike back and then end up in a worse position than you already started, right?
Yeah.
So I think that there is some experience, be it epigenetic or in your lifetime, that I identify with for how to do that, right? How to, like, water off a duck's back certain comments or certain attempts to get a rise out of you. But I also think that it's knowing when to turn it off, right? Like, knowing when to back away from a situation or a conversation that isn't serving the purpose, or knowing that the person isn't really engaging in a way, in a genuinely thoughtful way, right? Like, I've had some racially awkward situations, and I think that, Dadrian, we should definitely talk about your international experience, because that happens a lot, where people who don't have a lot of interactions with African Americans on a day-to-day basis have a stereotype, rumor, thought, or something in their head, and it's not necessarily malignant. It's not necessarily that they're thinking in a bad way, but the lack of exposure causes this kind of, like, awkward dance, and you have to kind of navigate that. How did you mean that? Exactly. So in general, I think that it really is about emotional regulation and self-care, right? Like, if you're not in a good place, don't even try it. But if you are mindful enough, if you're in a place where you can engage in a way where you're not taking things personally, where it is about trying to provide some education or some help or some direction, then I think it is a little bit more manageable.
I think it's important to be able to filter out. You need to set some guidelines for yourself so that you can, and this is the understood you, not you, Karen, but are we dealing with a teachable moment? Am I saying things where this person is having an emotional response and they're saying things that are aggressive, but they actually feel them? Or am I just dealing with an internet troll who has absolutely no interest in doing anything but disrupting the flow of conversation? One thing that I do, you can tell a lot, like, is this profile, and we're talking about an online space right now, is this profile attached to is this a real picture of a person? If you click on it, is it, or has this been fabricated to move through the internet kind of anonymously? If this is a person who has an opinion that they're ready to stamp their name on, that's a conversation worth having. If it's just a picture of a butterfly and somebody that on top of an American flag, and someone just wanting to spout off opinions anonymously, I'm not going to interact with that persona online, because it's there's a big difference between
Sometimes I'm like, this border collie has a lot of opinions about politics.
Right.
Lassie's back.
Who knows?
And one thing we learned as we get older, right? There are sadists. You remember, like, sadism was a term that you would only hear, when you're watching some murder mystery documentary about serial killers. But sadism is a real thing. And when you open yourself up to an online platform, murderers are not the only people that have sadistic personality traits. And when you say sadistic, it's simply someone that they get pleasure out of other people's pain. And that's all there is. And And there are actually a lot of people that have these personality traits. And when you're online, speaking to everybody in the world at the same time, you come across these people. And if that's your goal, if you're just typing just to bother me, and that is actually giving you pleasure, again, protect your peace. Like, don't even go there with that person. And they may or may not, but the fact that they may, that's something you need to kind of protect yourself from.
It's interesting too. I love the going back to even last episode, the parallels to what we do. We talk a lot. We talk about it in the check-in episode 4. This idea of separating self from others, right, is what you're saying, your anger, your worry, whatever it is, may be triggered by something I said, but generally has nothing to do with me, right? So your emotional response is your emotional response. And it goes even, back to to Gerren's use, like, who hurt you, back to last week, asking the question, like, what's up? Will disarm it more, and if someone comes back and just keeps throwing barbs at you, you know who they are, to that point of the sadistic personality. They're trying to get to you. It's like, have a nice day, right? Like, we're going to move on. I am not going to internalize your emotional experience. And that requires, I mean, one of the through lines of both of these episodes with you, Dadrian, is that emotional intelligence, right? That ability, you said it at the beginning, like, to index. Am I putting too much on me right now because I'm having a hard time processing what's happening? How I handle that, what I do with that, is for my own personal peace. Because I could get angry. And what we know about sustained long-term anger is that it actually has negative impacts on your immune system. It has negative impacts on your cognitive flexibility. It has negative impacts on your emotional stability. So yes, anger serves, but if you have it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you are actually doing yourself a disservice. You are shortening your lifespan, and you are making life harder for yourself, versus being able to be angry, let it pass, and then move in the direction that you feel at peace, where you can be, as your shirt says today, grateful. Have that gratitude, which sustains your immune system, builds it up, right? And gives you a longer term outlook on life. And so I love that parallel again, and I think it's just really important to call out. So it's hard. This is the thing I think all of us are afraid of, is the troll. And again, both of you giving me, as I re-enter this space by publishing this podcast, and I'm sitting here today on some social media assets that are causing me anxiety to repost because I'm worried about what someone is going to say. Like, this is a conversation for me in that case too, right? So I appreciate it.
I'm glad you touched on that, because in our prep meeting, we were talking a little bit about the protecting your peace and engaging online. And I mentioned how, kind of navigating the world as African American, you get some like real life practice kind of early on. I mean, hell, my dad's gay. I had, going out with him in the 90s, people yelling all kinds of terrible stuff at him and his friends, right? But you mentioned that, like, you kind of operating in the world as like cis white dude, like, you don't get a lot of that. How do you think that affects how you approach it now? Or does it approach your mindset as you go into this social media thing? Do you think that, there's a little bit of connection for that for you, or no?
I do. And I think it comes to, like, the life that we are used to is the life that we process and deal with, right? And we were talking about this coming in. I've never been a part of a gay couple who gets shouted at, as some friends of ours did over the summer, right? At a restaurant, no
Not
less,
even in the 90s,
right?
but
Not even in the 90s. I'm talking about 2024. Yeah. Or, you know, I won't use the example because I'm tired of it, but one of the things that men have a hard time with is accepting female rejection. In part because, hey, I'm a nice guy. Why are you rejecting me? But what you don't have exposure to when you walk up to her at the bar and she's just not in the mood for you is because she's been hollered at or had 20 other people try to buy her a drink, and she's just there to have fun with her friends, right? Like, her motivation for being there has nothing to do with you, and it's the constant. Now, if you were the only one that day and she was in a good mood, you might hit that. But what we do is we, like, women suck, right? Or some generalized sentiment, because we don't experience that experience frequently as men. Like, we don't get hit on frequently everywhere we go by a cashier at a McDonald's to, you know, some dude in an alley get hollering at you. Like, we're like, yeah, do that, please, because, you know, I want some attention.
I'll take
But
it.
it's also
so it's, yeah, go ahead.
it's also the expectations that we put on people and the entitlement that we move through the world with. Because even if you were the first guy that's ever approached her in a bar and she doesn't feel like talking to you, then she doesn't owe you an explanation. Just, all right, have a good night. There doesn't need to be a reason that is easy on your ego. There just doesn't. And men and our fragile egos, we always need these expectations that we have. But sorry, I interrupted you there.
But I think, no, it's good. It's good added context. And, you know, so to that extent, like, I have my in-person expectations, but I'm not used to having any kind of in-person trolling environment, like what we would call a troll. And so I have not calloused myself to it. I have not formulated. I'm not used to it. So now I fear it, right? It's that worry of what is going to happen by putting myself out there, that one person who, you know, there was a YouTube video I put out and he called me a poor Jake Paul. Like, I don't like that. I don't want that. I'm not used to that. So I think it absolutely informs my worry associated with experiencing that. And something I'm going to have to work through, because it goes back to everything you said, Dadrian. Like, what is the purpose? Last week you talked about conversation drives the culture forward. Our ability to engage. This work matters. So if someone comes along based on their own their own feelings, their own space, their own time, that's where they are. And not being worried about it or afraid of it is something I'm learning from you fellas. So I really appreciate it. I appreciate everything you're sharing today.
Let's take the 360 view of this. Let's talk about what you actually do, right? Like, what do you actually do to protect your peace? What does that actually look like for you?
So you want to protect your peace, but you also don't want to be a pushover, right? So kind of what Keith was saying is, you get better at life the more you experience it. So kind of how you'll, if you've never had a particular kind of confrontation, you don't know what you would do. You know how you have the guy on the couch watching MMA? He's like, just get behind him. It's like, you don't know what you would do if you've never been in a situation before. So for example, going back to that first corporate job I had in Slovakia, it stands out in my mind. I was in my late 20s. And I'll never forget it, because it's one of those things where you play it over in your head over and over again, where kind of the Dave Chappelle, like, sometimes something can happen. It's just so in your face, like, I wasn't ready for that. Right. And so very quickly, what happened was, we were having a networking corporate networking event, and it was after hours. It was open to the entire city. But it's kind of, dressed down, casual, come as you are. There's open bar drinks and everything. And at the time, I was a team leader. I was pretty high up in this small company. But again, I'm one of very few Black people in this city. We're talking about Eastern Europe. Even smaller number who are Black Americans. Even smaller number who are Black professional Americans in the corporate space. So, what happened was I was, just kind of at the bar, and this lady comes up and she's like, what do you do? Where are you? Oh, I work for, the company was at the time called Next Level Pharmaceuticals, a small pharma company. And she looks at me and she's like, you don't look like you work at Next Level. And I was like, what exactly do you mean like by that? Because I worked there for a couple of years now. So you obviously don't know what somebody that works there looks like, and that conversation progressed, and it's like the little kid, the meme where he's just like, that's racist, But I was young at the time. I was young at the time, and I kind of, just I kind of just let it slide, because what I do in these situations is I pick my battles. Um, in an effort to protect your peace, you can't always be ready to fight and be Malcolm X on the scene, having a discussion about race and politics in America or in the corporate space. Like, it's just not practical. And you really have to assess where you are in your personal bandwidth of things, right? Like, am I ready to have this conversation right now? And where am I, depending on what where it goes in the setting that we're in, am I willing to go there? And if I am willing to go there, what is the benefit of it? What, not necessarily what do I get out of it, but what is this situation? What is the community, society gain from me doing this right now? Sometimes the answer varies. So there's different variables that go into, are we taking it there right now, right here? So protecting your peace has a lot to do with picking your battles. And also there's a familiarity that comes with it. Like, you should be able to go through, that checklist of deciding. It takes a shorter amount of time, the more iterations that you go through that with intention. So I think that's a big part of it, just learning to pick your battles, and getting better at the battle. Like, am I about to dive into this emotionally, or do I want to ask some questions, get to the bottom of where is this sentiment coming from? Like, how did we get here? How did we get from, we're at a corporate event just having drinks, to, all right, now we're talking about racism and post-communistic, like, yeah. So
Like a Talking Head song. How did I get
yeah,
here?
yeah. So
I mean, I think that really connects strongly to what we were talking about in even the first episode of this season with, the thing about boundaries, right? Like, having a clear concept of where we're trying to go in this conversation and whether or not the goal is appropriate for the situation that we're in, kind of thing, right? Like, is this a full-fledged debate? Like, are we giving out our ideas here? Are we trying to win each other over? Like, what exactly are we trying to get to here? Setting those boundaries are super important, I think, for protecting your peace, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I think this is it's such a critical conversation for so many, especially in the age of, I've got to stand up. Like, we all have to have our time, right? So no one person is responsible for it all the time. Recognizing that we can't ever be the person that is responsible for standing up, speaking up, saying, doing the educating or whatever it is. And, meeting yourself where you are, knowing when it is your time, and understanding why. I love this conversation, especially for online, right? I think for me, I just disengage, and it's like, yep, nope, I'm just not even going to read the comments. Whereas like I look at my wife, she loves reading comments. There's no negative emotional reaction to any thread. She just gets into it and reads it. Whereas I'm like, humanity at its worst. I need to move on. And I love the way you framed both of these conversations, Dadrian. So I wanna say thank you for joining us for these two discussions. You know, for the audience out there, follow us, give us a like, give us a comment, share this episode if you think someone will provide value. If you want to know more about More in Common, ENT.com. Dadrian, if you could remind the folks where they can find you and the Diversity of Thought Project too before we sign off. And yes, we will have you back at some point. That is a must.
Definitely.
So Dadrian Eason, Dadrian, last name Eason, on LinkedIn, Facebook, Meta, under the Diversity of Thought Project. One final thought to wrap this up is standing up for yourself doesn't always look the same. There's definitely power in poise. So just because you take the decision like I'm not going to do this today, walking away it does take power. We've heard that before, but not letting someone throw you into an emotional state, really taking the time to decide for yourself how you're going to proceed, and whether that's confrontational or not. There's power in that. And there's some appreciation that we should have for ourselves when we remove ourselves from a situation. It's not necessarily avoiding conflict. Sometimes that's the way you stand up for yourself, by taking it upon yourself to protect your peace and your space. So thanks again for having me today, guys. Talk to you again soon.
Absolutely. One of the things that we always stress is meet yourself where you're at. Right? Thanks everybody again for joining us. I'm Gerren Taylor, Keith Richardson, our guest Dadrian Eason. We will see you next week.